We are going to look today more at React router hooks that give us lots of really useful functionality. We're going to learn about, as you can kind of see here from the lecture notes, hooks called useNavigate and useParams, and a hook called useOutletContext. And we're going to keep building on our Rick and Morty app. And we're going to see how we can have more routing functionality using this useNavigate and useParams hook, and how we can use this useOutletContext hook to pass data around between our app. Because we have these different pages, but what if I have some React state that lives in app.jsx now, and it's over here, and, we have our outlet, and the outlet renders the child that we want, and I've got, something important. And we're going to use this in a moment anyway, so we might as well import it. How do I get my state into the children for the child components that we render? And that's what the useOutletContext hook and React context is going to help us with, and that's what we're going to learn about today. So you'll see how to use these things and how to make these apps more complex. And to give just a bit of a preview of what we're going to build, we're going to use the Game of Thrones API, which is quite nice. And actually, let me pull that one up, because that's a good one to look at real quick. So we have this very nice Game of Thrones API that looks similar to what we've seen with Pokemon and other APIs, where we can make an HTTP GET request to get all the characters, or we can make an HTTP GET request to get an individual character. And there's a nice description here of the JSON object for each character that gets returned. And this is what we're going to end up building. The complete code is in a directory in our curriculum repo in this lesson. And so let's see what this gets us. And is this font size okay on the browser for everyone? Cool. So we're used to homepage, about page routing. We've seen how to build that. Where this starts to get interesting, and we've even seen how to do all characters, right? And this is, in fact, what you all were working on yesterday with Rick and Morty. But let's say I want to go to a page where I see all the details on Daenerys Targaryen. So you all know how to write a React component to get details for an individual character. And you could even maybe have a drop down to select the character. But look at the URL up here, and we have character/0. And as you may guess, 0 corresponds to the ID in the JSON from the Game of Thrones API for Daenerys Targaryen. And if I change this to 1, we go to someone else, to Samuel Tarly, and 2, and so on. Right? So our routing is now going to get more advanced. This is called a URL param. And let's just make notes. URL params. And the way that you often see this written when you're looking at a route or URL description is with this semicolon. So we would say that this route is character/:ID, and this ID is a parameter in the URL because it's something that can change, right? The same way we might pass parameters or arguments to a function. And you can indeed have lots of nesting if we had more, if maybe we wanted to make a page for Jon Snow's favorite foods. And just as we've seen where React Router hooks up the browser URL bar and the URL here to the state of our React app, we're going to now do that with params so we can pass that information around. And we're also going to learn how to use React context to favorite people. So I now have Jon Snow as a favorite. And if I go to all my characters, let's favorite Samuel Tarly too. And if I go to favorites, Samuel is here. So this is a little preview of the cake that we're going to bake. So any questions before we dive in? Okay, Awesome. Let's do a little review of what we covered yesterday by just building out the skeleton of our app. And I'm going to start, I think, with a little design of where we want to end up. And let me just move the zoom toolbar out of the way so we have nice tail draw. And I want a couple different pages. We want a home page. I want an about page. I think I may not have laid this out right. We may run out of page. Putting these in the boxes inside the box. We want all characters. And I think I'm just going to get rid of this outer box because I think it's just causing trouble at this point. And we're going to want, you know, probably like a card for each character. So it's going to look something like this. And I'm going to want a page for a single character. And let's call that a character. And there we have lots of info. And then we're going to want probably a favorites page, since that we saw that feature. Right, and each of these is actually a character card. So let me get rid of these and do a little duplication. And the favorites page is also going to show a bunch of characters. And I probably want a nav bar. Like I probably want a common nav bar across all these pages as well. And this will be a little ugly with the text, and I apologize in advance. But in the interest of time, I'm going to run with it. Actually, there we go. That's not so terrible. Right, and we're going to make a really simple nav bar. And before I dive into writing code, can someone maybe remind me, like based on what we learned yesterday, like how can I sort of make a template for this with what we learned about React Router? And where might that template for that live? Like I know there's going to be a nav bar everywhere, and I'm going to want to render different stuff depending on where I'm at. And let's actually put the routes that we want to put here. So it's going to look something like this, right, for the character page. And for favorites, it's just going to be favorites. And I suppose we should have an ID at the end of this as well. About is pretty straightforward. The home page is our base route, so it's just going to be that. And then let's do characters, plural, for all our characters. So if this is our app JSX component, what are we going to want in here? What am I going to want to put inside this return statement? DJ, yes, sir.
For your common nav bar, you'll put the link to that component. Yep. And then you'll put your outlet underneath that.
Yeah, exactly. Remember, we've got the nav bar, and then we've got whatever else we're going to render. And that's what React Router's outlet And I don't know why it's doing that. Let's try this one more time. There we go. That's what the outlet component does for us. And for consistency, let's do this so we can see what this looks like. And I see a couple hands up. Nathan, yes, sir.
Yeah, so if let's say for example you're gonna have a footer as well that was gonna be displayed on all the pages, that would be would that be placed below the outlet or like would that like where would that go in
Exactly.
your app.jsx?
Exactly. It would go below the outlet.
Okay.
Yeah, and the way to think of this outlet component is it's a placeholder, and then React Router figures out what goes inside there. And other than that, app JSX renders whatever's inside the component in the normal way.
Okay, so in this scenario, like the outlet is going to be all of the content that's going to be changing for each page, and then we
Exactly.
have the nav bar and the footer. They're going to be staying the same, and so those are kind of hard set into the app.jsx.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, we
Okay,
can go ahead and add a footer as we build this because that would actually be great to see.
nice.
Yeah, great question. Lewis, yes, sir.
That's my bad. Actually, I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Okay, cool. So this is great because we've done a bit of design already of what we want to build. And we already now like I have an idea of where we want to end up. And we've seen the actual application. And we've added a new feature that we want. We've got the footer. So let's go ahead and build this. And let me make a little comment here for some pseudocode, and this isn't function commenting, so we don't want that. But let's do a little pseudocoding. I have a basic React app right now. Let's go ahead and refresh. But this is all it is. I haven't added a router. I haven't added pages. I haven't added anything. So let me grab. I'm just going to go from the bottom up in the participants list here. Let me shoot into Slack because I know people appreciate the question order. Let me just shoot into Slack the question order here, and apologies in advance as this is not random. It's essentially reverse alphabetical. So Will, Wes, Tyler, Tom, Terrence, Stephen, and Sean. I could use your folks' help in pseudo coding out how we're going to build this. And as always, the rule of the game is if you're not sure, if you want to, you can always phone a friend. So what are the steps that I need to do to build our app? I know that this is where we want to end up, but what are the intermediate steps along the way? Like, what's one of the first things I might want to do? Will. And it's not a trick question because some of these initial steps are very simple and straightforward.
I guess link the nav bar.
Yeah, make the nav bar. I think that's a good one. Totally. And Wes, after I've made the nav bar, and here I'll actually pull this TL draw up so we can refer to it. What's something else I want to do?
Create a router component.
Yeah, we need to create the router. And Wes, by the way, when I make this navbar component, where is it going to be in my project? What directory will I put it in?
I'm trying to remember if you might create a directory called components or pages or something like that.
Is the
Where
navbar a page or a component?
I guess it would be a component.
Exactly. We definitely are going to create a pages directory, but the navbar is not a page, so we wouldn't put it in pages. Yeah, and that's what I meant when I said like some of these steps will be really straightforward. Create a components directory, and I know I'm going to want to make a pages directory, so I'm just going to put that. I'm just going to put both of these first. I might as well do these right off the bat to get things in a nice spot. Awesome. Will and Wes, thank you. So Tyler, again, pseudocoding, like what's one of the initial steps I need to do, or if you want to maybe like the next step after we create the router to build this thing.
Set our paths.
Yeah, we gotta actually define the routes. And remind me again, where do I go to do that?
In the router JSX.
Yeah, exactly, in router.jsx. Awesome. And let's see, I'm sorry, Tyler, did we get to you already?
Yeah, that was
Yeah, that
me.
was you right now. I knew it. My brain was just spiraling around. So Tom, I've created a pages directory. I've created a components directory. I've made the nav bar. I've created the router. I've defined the router. Well, and actually, I need to install React Router DOM, right? Before I can even create this router.
I was just gonna say maybe like before we do the nav bar and like so we create our directories and then like figure out what packages we need. So maybe like React Router DOM, we're gonna need Axios to call from the API and just like get all our packages kind of like configured before we start coding.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And that's part of why I wanted to do this pseudocoding exercise, because I know you all know this, but I think writing this out helps, and starting to think about a process of how you write code helps too, to like lay out the skeleton of stuff. So this is good. We're going to create pages, we're going to create components, we're going to install dependencies, we're going to make a nav bar components, and then we're going to want to render it an app. So we create the router and we define the routes. Oh, Bootstrap. I totally forgot about Bootstrap. Thank you so much in the chat, Nathan. Good call. Tom, what do I want to do after I've created router.jsx and defined some routes in it?
Maybe we could, so like we have our NTL draw, we kind of have like our page structure. So maybe like we've got the routes now, so we want to make sure we have the page elements in our pages so that the paths actually lead to something.
Right. You mean basically create page components for each page?
Yes.
Yeah. And I call this creating skeleton code, because there's not a lot of content in there, but there's just enough so that there's a component and we can import it and it runs and we see something show up on the screen. Awesome. Thank you, Tom. And so just running down the list, Terrence, I have a question for you, which is, well, actually, now that we've created some page components, what might we want to do next?
To be honest, I'm looking through the curriculum right now. I don't know if this is the right answer, but would you connect browser router to our main JSX?
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, that was going to be a question I was going to follow up with in just a minute. Like now that we've created the router, we need to hook it up so it renders. And we do that. There's that router provider component and we import it, but we need to connect our router to main.jsx. And we replace that app with I think it's like router provider, router equals router. Oop, I'm so sorry. Let's bring that back. Something like that. And let me ask you guys a question. Does it make sense to do this at this point or earlier in the process? And I'm not sure there's a right answer here, so honest question.
I think if you do it from the beginning when you're setting everything up, I would treat it like a setup, and then that way you can see things work.
Yeah, I agree. I think treating it as a setup step so we can see things makes a lot of sense. And in fact, what I would suggest is let's break creating the routes into 2 steps. Let's first just define that very basic route for app. And in fact, I'm going to suggest we put the nav bar later, because like you're saying about setup, I think getting the router working is core functionality, right? While the nav bar is more of a feature. So let's do the core functionality first. So let's create the router. Let's define a basic route with app. Let's connect it. Let's create the page components first, so that then when we define the routes for each page, after we make each one, the component will already exist, so we can test that it works. And then we can go ahead and add our nav bar. And running down the list from Terrence to Stephen, if I want to see the routes that I create show up and render inside the app component, what do I need to do? What do I need to add to app so that the route child will actually show up and render?
You need to import the outlet in app.jsx.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And in fact, I think we should maybe just do this right here, like import outlet into app.jsx and render it. And that way, as we add each page and each route, we will see stuff show up. And, you know, it'll go here, or I don't know if an outlet without any routes will throw an error, so maybe it'll go here. So this, now, like, we've mapped out a whole lot of what we're going to do without even writing a line of code. And I also want to point out, like, how easy it is to think through maybe things I forgot when I'm not writing code and I'm not thinking about it. And now I have like a pretty straightforward path I can follow to build, and this I think will help me be more productive and do stuff more efficiently. So now that we've kind of group pseudo coded, I'll sort of be the driver and I'll build some of this out. And I might ask a couple questions along the way, but we've honestly, I think, ironed out a lot of the details. So Sean, you may be up next once we get all this stuff built, and then we're on to our next stage of building. So great job, folks, and thank you, especially those of you answering questions. And I'll send a list of the next chunk of folks up next, but I think this is a good amount of stuff, and it's time to start writing code. So I've got my app running here. I've got the browser console open so I can see errors. I've got Vite dev server running here, and I'm just going to go ahead and work down the list of tasks. I need a pages directory. I need a components directory, and we need to install dependencies. So let's, let me make sure I'm in the right spot. npm install, and you can pass multiple npm packages on one line. So we're going to install Axios and React Router DOM and React Bootstrap and Bootstrap, which Bootstrap needs for the CSS. And actually, there is one thing I forgot with Bootstrap that we need to do as part of our setup. And Sean, actually, can you maybe remind me what that is? When we're using Bootstrap, there's like a setup step that we have to do every time. And you can always phone a friend.
You gotta import the components that you're using with Bootstrap. So for example, with the nav bar, you gotta like import the nav components.
We absolutely have to do that. There's also something with the Bootstrap CSS that we have to do.
Bootstrap CSS.
we have to, in main JSX, import that bootstrap CSS file. I think it's something like bootstrap.
Oh, the min thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is the bootstrap CSS file that has all of the CSS classes that bootstrap uses. And I believe React Bootstrap needs that because there's a lot of bootstrap classes inside those components. And just for completions, just to be a completionist, I'll add this to our setup steps. And thank you very much for throwing that in the chat, Nathan. That is super helpful. Bootstrap.min.css. And again, I feel like the only reason I remembered that was I was installing all the NPM stuff and I saw Bootstrap and I was like, oh, wait a minute. And if I hadn't gotten all this other stuff out of my head, and if I was still thinking about it, I'm sure I would have forgotten that step. So let's see here. We've created our pages directory. We've created our components directory. We've installed our dependencies. We've imported the Bootstrap into main. Oh, what's that about there being a sub on the list, Michael?
I was just saying maybe that could be like a example thing, a reminder underneath one of the points. It just be like, hey, remember there's this min feature. Or for
Oh,
it doesn't
yeah.
have to be. I was just saying, I know like in my notes, I like to put little, like a brief couple words or something. That's all.
Yeah, I'll leave that one for you guys. That is a good note to add. I would recommend that you all start like making a notes file where you keep little bits of stuff like that. For the pseudocoding, I don't quite want to go into that level of detail, but I'll throw the file name in here so that we can remember that one. And now I need to go ahead and create the router. And I remember this is in the source directory and the file name is router.jsx. But now actually I could use some help in going ahead and building this thing. So let me actually throw out, I think, the next round of group coders that are going to help me navigate. And again, just moving from the bottom up, I think we're looking at Saul and Roger and Oliver and Nathan, followed by Natalie, Michael Roy, and Lewis. So Natalie, and that's a good group. So I could use your guys' help in building out some of our next steps here. And as always, you can phone a friend. So Saul, can you remind me, how do I build my router? What's probably the first thing I need to do here on this blank canvas of router.jsx?
You gotta import your React router. So I think it's import create browser router from the React router DOM.
Yeah, exactly. And I hope I got that right as a named import.
Yeah, it looks right.
And actually Saul, and Roger, actually, what's my next step now that I've created browser router? What do I want to do with it now that I've imported it? And as always, you can phone a friend. And Saul, maybe if you want to help out, because I realize the import step, I want to make sure you have enough camera time, so to speak. So
The next one is going to be just creating the your function. So it's const, and then yeah. And then I think right from there we can move on to making our home, which is that part I don't remember necessarily.
awesome. Roger, do you want to take us on to the next step here or phone a friend?
You can create an empty list inside of there first. and then create empty directory and start setting your paths.
Yep.
Path and / element app.
Yep. I love it. Awesome. And so we've got an array of objects, and this first object has our parent component for the whole thing, which is our app, which is on the root path. And Roger, remind me, if I want to be able to import this router that we created here on line 4 into another file, what do I have to add so that I can export it from here and then import it somewhere else?
You have to add the export default router.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
All right. So this is a good start, right? We don't have any pages yet, so there wouldn't be anything to put inside children. So I'm going to hold off on that one. Let's look at our pseudocode and move on to the next step. So we created the router. We defined the basic route with app. And now, Oliver, could you maybe help me with connecting our router to main.jsx? And as always, you can phone a friend. Oh, did we lose Oliver? All right, Nathan, you are up, sir. Can you help me with connecting our router to main.jsx here?
Sure, let's do it. Let's see here. So where you're in your main.jsx. So you gotta import router from and then a string dot / router.jsx.
Right, we got to import router from source router.jsx.
And then we're gonna do another import statement that's gonna be the router provider from React router DOM.
Yep.
And then I think I would want to take out those React strict modes on there. And
Yep.
then you're gonna do router provider as a component. So it's like the
Yep.
yeah.
We're gonna render the router provider component.
Right.
Yep.
And so that's gonna be router equals and then in curly brackets you're gonna do router.
Yeah, we're gonna render the router provider component and pass in as prop. So the name of the prop is router, and we're passing in the variable router that we imported. Right, so we're passing in router for the router prop, we're passing in router. Awesome. So now it looks like I ran into an import issue. I probably made a typo somewhere along the way here. Let's see what I did. Import router from source router JSX. Does this file exist? I didn't do this on purpose, but can anyone maybe tell me what's wrong with my import statement here? Tom, yes, sir.
Is it because we're already in source? So it's like looking for a source directory instead of source?
Yeah, exactly. Our import paths are relative. Like here we have ./app.jsx, which is in source, which you obviously you don't need anymore, or ./index.jss. It's in the same directory as main. The main JSX is already in source, so our relative path is just ./. And actually, can someone tell me now what's the problem? Why am I seeing this error page here? And what can I do to see my homepage?
I could answer that, Adam.
Awesome, please do.
Since I think my mic's working now.
Perfect, thank you, Oliver.
Think you just want to remove the favorites. So yeah, remove everything after the first slash.
Yeah, exactly. Our app is working great. We just had favorites in the URL bar from when we were looking at the completed Game of Thrones app. Awesome. So now we've come really far, right? Our router is hooked up. It's rendering. We've installed all our dependencies and we've set up our skeleton. And the next step here is to create some basic page components for each page. I suggest we start with let's see, what are our different pages? Let me go to our TL draw real quick. We've got the about page, the home page, all characters, and a character. And since all characters and a character need to make API calls and are a little more complex, let's come to those later, because right now our goal is to make sure that the router functionality is working. So I just want some simple pages up and running and routes for them to confirm that all that works. So let's make our about page and let's make our home page, and actually Saul, or I'm sorry, Oliver, if you can maybe guide me through making like the world's simplest homepage and hooking it up to the router, that'd be awesome.
You want to go to app.jsx?
Yep.
Or are we creating a new a separate homepage?
We need to create a component named homepage,
Okay,
and we are going to
so
hook it up to the router to render for
so
our
go
base
to
URL here.
homepage or go to pages, create a file under pages. We'll call it homepage.
Yep.
And then you want to create a function.
Yep.
Put a return.
Yep.
And
And
then
what do you want to put in the return statement?
just put a header, a head h1 saying this is the homepage or something like that.
Yeah, sounds great.
And then you want to return default homepage at the bottom, or export default
Nice.
homepage.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. All right, I've created my homepage component. Oliver, how can I hook it up to my router now?
You want to go to your router file and then should create another object within the list or the array. So yeah, create another one and then you would put path and then you would do the quotes and then you put homepage.
Well, I want the homepage to show up here on the base route. I don't want to put /homepage.
Oh, I think you put you would put it under children, right?
Yep, exactly. We need children. And what do I put here in children?
A list or an array with an objects inside, and then you want to put index equals or index true,
Yep.
and element you want to put home page.
Nice. Awesome. You, sir. And I just need to add the comma here after element to make that error go away. All right, awesome. Thank you, Oliver. And Nathan, I think you're next up, though I know you've already been helping out, but I'm just going to run down the list. I've created the routing for my homepage element, but I'm not seeing it render here. What do I need to do to hook up my child routes to app.jsx so we'll see our homepage?
You gotta add the path in there.
So I've got index true because the homepage, I don't want to give it a separate path. I want it to be here.
Gotcha.
And remember, you can always phone a friend.
Wait, so what was the question again?
I need to see this is the homepage here for this URL.
Gotcha. Let me see. Go back to your router page.
Yeah, and what I would just ask you guys is if you're not sure, please do phone a friend, because I think the goal is like, hey, if I know it, great, but if not, let's keep it moving because there's not a lot of value in like looking it up on the spot.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm a little lost, so I'm gonna go ahead and phone a friend.
Awesome. Who do you want to phone?
Let's do Albert.
Yeah, I see Albert's hand up. Awesome. Albert, yes, sir.
Yeah, did you already put the outlet in is it app.jsx?
I did not.
So I think
that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I know you were getting there, Nathan. So we add the outlet, and Albert, remind me again what this outlet component does.
That's pulling a page from the router. So since we're at the base URL, it's just showing our homepage.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Based on the URL, the router figures out what component we want to render based on our routing, and it sticks it wherever this outlet component is, and that's what gets rendered. So we're making pretty good progress here. We made our homepage component, and in fact, we already made our homepage route. Let's add an about page just so we can see some routing in action. And Natalie, could you help me with that, with creating the about page and adding some routing for it?
Yeah, so under your pages directory, you'll need to make an about page file. And then there you'll make the function for about page.
Yep, I'm gonna be.
Yeah.
You want, and what would you like us to say on the about page?
I don't know. This is the about page.
Yeah, exactly. There's not a lot to say. And then how do I hook it up to my router?
So you have to go to your router file and then add, I think you have to add another object.
Yep.
And then there you'll define the path that you want.
Yep.
And then connect it to the element, yeah, about page.
Yep. And remind me again, what does this element attribute do?
I'm not exactly sure. I just know that it like connects it to whatever you're rendering on that component page.
Yeah, exactly. What this object does is it tells React Router when this path here is in the URL, render this component.
Got it.
Nice. Awesome. So we're really close here, right? I think some good next steps would be, like, I think now is a good time to maybe build our nav bar and throw some links in there. So we've got the nav bar. So now this is done, and this is done, and this is done, and this is done, and this is done. So now we make the nav bar component, and we probably are going to want like a link to home and a link to about. And once we make the nav bar, we should probably make our all characters page. So let's get this nav bar working with a couple links, and then we'll build out all characters and make our API call. And just moving down, let me do a little bit of setup here for the nav bar to get the ball rolling, and then Mike, you are up next, sir. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a component named navbar.jsx, and we're going to have a function for it. And it's going to look like this, and it's going to return stuff. And I'm going to use the HTML nav attribute. And I don't remember too much about it, so I'm going to look it up real quick. Not navigator, but nav. And I just want an example of how to use it. And what I see here is nav, and they've got an ordered list rather. OL is ordered list, UL is unordered list, but it doesn't really matter. And they've got some list elements in there. So I think we're going to want something like that. Right. And this is going to be, we're going to put maybe our like link to the home page there and our link to the about page there. And I know I'm going to need to export it. But Mike, maybe you can help me hook this up and make it real. Like, I want to, first of all, render this so it shows up every time at the top of the page. And then I want links that I can click on to take me to my homepage and my about page. So Mike, Darrell, would you be able to help me get that ball rolling?
Yeah, so for your link for homepage, you'll just have in that first list item div right there, element, you'll have link to,
Yeah.
and then you'll just have quotations with a /, and then it'll just call it home, and then you'll have that, and then you can do similar. So for your about link to, you'll just have quotations about /, same deal about, and then we'll eventually do characters. I mean, you could build that, I suppose, as well if you wanted to.
Yeah,
Or
I'm
we can-
gonna, I don't, those pages don't exist yet, and that's the only reason. I don't want to add a feature that doesn't, that's gonna break before it exists, but you're absolutely right. And I think I'll add some to-dos up here to do link to all characters, to do link to a character page. Because you're absolutely right, we are gonna make those and we don't want to lose track of them. I try to not write. I like to keep my code in as good a state as possible. So if I can sequence it, so as I'm adding each piece, it's working and hooked up, that I try to kind of do it that way. But we're absolutely going to come back and do that. And then how do I get this to show up on the screen and always be at the top of the page, no matter which page I'm at?
So you're going to want to, I believe, import that into app.jsx.
Yeah. And then where do I want to use it?
You're going to want to use it. Well, the outlet will render everything. So you could probably use it just right above hello world, because you have that displaying everywhere, or
Yeah.
right below it.
Exactly. And I think, in fact, I'll get rid of the hello world entirely. And I do need to import it. So let's import navbar from /components navbar. And there we go. I don't think I need the JSX. I know sometimes we add that. It's not going to hurt either way. The 1 and the 2 are showing up because this is an ordered list as opposed to an unordered list. I'm going to change it to that. Not that the dots are that much better, but we would use like a CSS class to fix that. Nice. Awesome, Mike. Thank you. And there was a request for a footer. So in fact, let's do that as well. And obviously, if you were building this out for real, like using the bootstrap nav might be nice, but just in the interest of simplicity and time, we're just going to use basic HTML elements. And these nav and footer HTML elements are more about like semantic meaning than anything. So there's a footer tag here, and actually, Mike Roy, I believe you're up next. Could you maybe just quickly walk me through creating a footer component like we did for nav that just does something simple and rendering it on the screen?
Of course, we got the footer. Would you just add it in the same file? You just have additional things in a different unordered list, or
Yeah,
yeah.
pretty much. I need to create the component, right? So I'm going to go here to components. I'm going to go footer.jsx. And I'm just going to do const footer equals, and it's going to be really simple. It's not even going to do much. I think all it's going to do is, this is the footer. And we're going to export default footer. Now, where do I want to put it here? My footer component in app.jsx, so it will always render below the main page content.
Would you?
And you can phone a friend.
So returning, I don't know if you'd want to like put it outside of the tag or just below outlet, or feeling like one of those two would probably be it. If not, I'll phone somebody.
Yeah, you want to put it below outlet.
Okay.
And it would help if I imported it.
Import, yeah. Import footer from the footer JSX, yeah.
And just rolling down the list, Lewis, can you explain, like, why do I need to put the footer below outlet? Why do I want to?
Because it's just going to render those in the same order you have them. So if you just put footer on the top, it'll put, or vice versa. Yeah, it'll just render no order.
Exactly. Right. I know outlet feels special because the React router decides to put in there, but these are just normal components at the end of the day. And just like if I had H1, you know, this gets rendered the same, the same way that like HTML gets rendered, simply in order, top to bottom. That's true with components as well. And the outlet is just a placeholder. All right, awesome. So we've got a navbar, we've got our page, and we've got a footer. It's 5 till 10. So I think this is a good time for a short break. Let's take, how does a 5-minute break sound to folks? Awesome. Let's take 5 or 6, just come back on the hour. So at 10 Central, and we'll build out the all characters page and actually get some data and then start seeing some of these next features. But hopefully this review was useful and this pseudo coding process was useful to see in action. So thank you very much, everyone, and see you in like 6 minutes on the hour. Okay, awesome. So we've been doing some really good group coding or mob coding, as they call it, and pseudo coding along the way. And I just went ahead and kind of broke it up into initial sets, into stages, because it's good to see this as well, because pretty much every program you write ever will sort of follow this process. There's going to be the initial setup, and we did that of installing dependencies and creating whatever directories we need and so on. Hooking up, I like to call it core functionality. Like our routing functionality is really core to all of our program now, all of our front-end app. So let's get that working right away, right? And I just added the absolute minimum stuff I needed so that we could confirm, right? I didn't write tests, but we can like manually test and QA to confirm that that is working. And now we're going to make the all characters page. And now we're going to get into a page that has features, right? And this is like more of a specific application feature than like skeleton core functionality stuff. And I went ahead and did a little setup work. I made an all characters page. And as you can see, it doesn't do a lot right now. And I went ahead and let me close some of these other things out because we don't need them.
Your screen isn't shared right now.
Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. Thank you so much, guys. That would help, wouldn't it? Okay, let's try that one more time. So you all heard me talk through it, and now I can just visually show you. I just added in all caps, like sort of the different stages of our development process. And it's useful to think about your work as a process. And I think you can see how we make our lives so much easier by taking care of all our initial setup and like core functionality first, before we get into the dirty details of the all characters page and API calls and stuff. And I was just saying that I went ahead and I created a basic all characters page. I went ahead and I created a route to that like we've been doing on characters. And as Mike pointed out, I went ahead and added that to our navbar, right? And we have a flow now. And we have code that we've written that we can use as a guide and a pattern as we add more and more pages and features. So now I want to make this all characters page real. And Landon, Kirk, Kara, Jose, and James, you all are going to be sort of our group navigators for this next round. And as always, I love to pseudocode. So Landon, maybe you can help me out before we even start writing code. Can you help me pseudocode out, like, what are some of the steps we need to do to make the all characters page real? And this is where I want to get all the characters from Game of Thrones and then render them in a list of bootstrap cards.
Yeah, so step 1, define state variables.
Yep, we're gonna need to define some component state to what's going in there. What's the state for?
And then after that, you're gonna need to update that state variable with the setter from it. So you're gonna need to write a API function using Axios to then go back and set that state variable so that you can use it with a .map function to render different components in your DOM.
Right. We're gonna have to create some component state to store all our characters, the data. We're gonna have to make that API call, that HTTP request with Axios to get the characters. And then, like you were saying, we're gonna have to update characters state with our response data.
And then you might wrap the API into the use effect so that in the event of changes to the state variable, different components in the DOM update accordingly.
Yeah, we're gonna need a use effect hook to control the order things happen in our component for consistent behavior. And actually, we'll see that this becomes important later on. And then what's the last thing I need to do so that my characters will then show up on the screen?
So you will, I mean, you can go about it a couple of different ways, but you could make a card component that you import into whatever page, and we're doing the all characters page, so you'll import that, and then you will pass back props from the response from the API to the card.
Yeah.
So that each card renders with the correct data.
Exactly. And I'm gonna have to map through the through the characters array and render each character with character card. Awesome. Great job, man. This is a great pseudocode process, and everyone has like different levels of detail. I like the level of detail you were going to. Actually, just for simplicity, I'm doing it at a bit of like a higher level of detail. I'm not going quite to that level, but I would actually, I think that's a good idea, and I would recommend, as you all pseudocode, that's like the level that you go to. And let's see, there we go. And I'm putting my pseudocode right where we're going to be writing this code here on the all characters page. Awesome, man. Thank you. Kirk, can you help me with well, actually, I'll take care of step one, because I think that one's pretty straightforward, right? We need to use some component state, and I'll just call this characters and set characters, and I'll do use state, and it's going to be an empty array. And I'm going to go ahead and import use state. And I want to point out, so if I was doing this, like what I would probably do is something like this. I'd create some fake data and I'd stick it in there, because now I can go ahead and like write my code to render it, and I can do a whole lot of work with that very small amount of fake data and get something visual on the screen. And then as I start to make my API calls and stuff, I can see if that's working or not. The trade-off to this is it makes the workflow a little more complex because there's a little more to keep track of, and it's a slightly different order. So I think we should continue with this flow, but I wanted to point that out as a useful tool in the toolbox. Kurt, can you help me with making the HTTP request API call to Axios to get these characters from the Game of Thrones API? And if we look here, we can see that it looks like the URL is this right here, right? So I know that that's the endpoint that I need to hit. So Kirk, maybe what's like the first thing I want to do to start building up my Axios get HTTP get request I'm going to make to get this data?
Would you use effect?
Yeah, let's make a use effect. And let me see what's up with my formatting. Okay, so I know that use effect is a hook. I know that I import it from the React package. I know that a hook is just a function that kind of feels and works differently. What am I passing in as an argument to this use effect? What am I doing with it?
You put no argument, and then I would make a constant get characters.
Okay, I'm going to comment this out for the moment just so it's not getting in the way. And what's this get characters going to be?
Oh, that one's gonna be to use Axios, the async, and then you would get the response equals await Axios.
So I'm making an arrow function and I'm making it an async function.
Mm-hmm.
And then what am I doing with Axios?
Dot get to the website.
Yeah, let me go ahead and just kind of do a little wrangling here. And I don't like that their API includes a capital C in their example for the route. I doubt it's necessary, but I'm going to leave it as it's there. And this is going to return an object that has the HTTP response. So I'm going to go ahead and make a variable that it gets assigned to like that. Awesome. Thank you, Kirk. And Kara, I've got my get characters async function. We know at some point we're going to need to do the use effect. Oh, I need to import Axios. That would help. Thank you so much. And that's probably why I was getting that squiggly. Nice. What's my next step here in building up this HTTP request to get this data?
I mean, it's just going to be pulling all the data that way. So, I mean, you're going to want to encase that inside of a use effect. But you said before that?
Whichever step you want to do next. Either way.
I mean, my next step, I would put it inside the use effect for one thing, but and then the use effect would have an arrow function.
Yeah. So, and in fact, I know I'm going to hijack this for just a moment because I know this is a source of confusion for folks like seeing this syntax. So I think what we've seen with use effect is something like this, but it ends up looking like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to kind of illustrate to folks, the use effect is a function that takes 2 arguments. It just happens that the first argument is an arrow function definition that is our callback that we like wrap the logic we wanted to do in. And the second argument is usually an empty array. And Kara, remind me what this empty array is for again?
That's going to hold your dependencies. It's going to tell your use effect when to run. So if we leave it empty, it's going to run every time the page refreshes, essentially.
Yeah.
But we're probably going to want to set it to characters.
Maybe we'll see when we get there. And then I think you were saying that we want to call our get characters function inside the use effect.
Yes.
Awesome. So this looks like we have a lot of good working code here. What's an easy way that I could test if this is working or not? That's maybe a little bit of a trick question.
I mean, you could just throw a console log your response.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what I want to do. And lo and behold, hey, we've got data, which is awesome. And if I look inside here, I see that what I care about is in a property data on the response object. So I'm going to go ahead and do const characters equals response dot data, and I'm going to console log characters, and let's see what that looks like. And so now I've got this array of characters, which looks awesome. Take us home, Kara. I've got some React component state here. I know I need to do something with that. I know I'm getting the data. What's my next step in the journey?
You're gonna want to return your characters dot data within your get characters function. Or actually, I suppose you could just set characters within the function, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I can use the set characters function to update my state.
And then you're gonna want it to be, yeah, just set characters. Characters. I don't really like that characters is named twice there. Like you use it in your
Oh, that's a good
there,
call.
but
Yeah, no, that's a good call. Let me rename this. I agree with you. Let's do character data and character data. And we don't even really need response. We don't really need this. It's really up to you if you like that or if you just want to response that data. Yeah, this is hooked up. Awesome. And actually, Kara, just to close the loop on this, like if now I want to maybe see my React state actually render, how could I do that?
you could console log characters outside of your function.
I think that's a great idea. Just down
Then
here,
every
let's
time you
just
refresh
console
the
log
page, it
characters.
should give you that.
Yeah, and let me go ahead and I'll comment out this other console log. And now I know that this is coming from my React component state, and I've hooked that up correctly, and the data is getting in there. Awesome, thank you. And Jose, you're up next, sir. And I think the next step is, and if we look at this, if our pseudocode, we have created our component state, we've made our request, we've updated the characters, we've added the use effect hook. We need a character card, and we need to map through the characters array and render each character with a character card.
I have actually have a quick question, if that's
Yeah.
okay. You said that for the use effect that the first argument is just a function. So if that's the case, do we need to wrap get characters function inside of an arrow function?
That's a great question. We could do it. We don't want to call the function inside the use effect. So we could do this. And that would work just fine. I'm not sure why this went all squiggly on me just now. Effect callbacks are synchronous to prevent race conditions. Oh, the answer is no, because React does not like an async function being passed in as the argument, and get characters as an async function. And that's the purpose of the wrapper of the arrow function around get characters.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, great question. Oh, that was not quite what I wanted to do. I wanted to refresh this page. There we go. Awesome. And I think I might actually get the ball rolling on some of our character card so we can build it out. Landon, yes, sir.
I was experimenting with something last night, just writing the API in another file and passing a setter to it, and then updating the state variable, and then calling it within the use effect. Does that mess up like the order in any way in how use effects being used? Like on line 19, if you pass something to the get characters and exported that whole API function and then called get characters within the all characters page within a use effect, is that changing any order in which the API is being called?
No, it would not. That's a good question. That is more an advanced pattern. If you want, shoot me that code on GitHub and I'll show you a way to modify it where by using more kind of like async await sort of control flow, you don't need to pass the set state in as an option, and you can just have like a function that makes your API call that's an async, and you import it here and you grab that response and then you use the update the state.
Okay. Thank
Can you include me in that response, Adam? I'd like to see that pattern too.
Yeah, totally. Landon, just throw it in like the main whiskey channel and tag me on it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. So, we're almost home here, and I think because I want to make sure, and I know that I hope the sort of like group coding has been useful. I know it's also taken a bit longer. So Jose and James, my apologies. I think I'm going to switch gears, and especially because some of this is stuff that we've been reviewing this morning. Just knock out a couple of the other pieces because I want to get to the next bit of React router functionality that we're going to look at to make sure that you all have at least a bit of work time between now and the second half of the lecture. Does that sound good to folks? Okay, awesome. And again, thank you for the group coding and the folks who are answering questions. And I'd love some feedback on if that was like a useful technique or not. So we're almost home here. I'm going to kind of reverse the order a bit. We know we need a character card to render all these characters. I'll make it in a minute. For now, I think I'm just going to do characters.map and put this in an unordered list just to get something started so we see stuff on the screen. I always like trying to get there as quickly as I can. And my map is a function that takes an arrow function, and the arrow function gets fed each thing in the array, and we can have it have an index. So I've got character C and index I, and we're just going to do li and c.name. And since I'm rendering like an array of elements, React needs a key, and that will be our index property. And it looks like I probably am not accessing the object correctly. So let's see what's in here. And indeed, it's family, first name, full name. So, and in fact, maybe instead of this index, I could just use the ID, but it doesn't really matter, and it doesn't hurt to use an index. Though I think for simplicity, there's one less thing to think about. Maybe I'll just do this, and we'll do the key is c.id, and then this becomes c.full name. There we go. And now we have my characters. And so now I am going to make my character component, my character card. And I know it's going to be we're eventually going to grab the bootstrap card and put it in there. But we can do a lot of nice setup work before even doing that. And as always, I'm going to pseudocode because I do enjoy pseudocoding. And I need to think about what this does. I want it to display full name. What else do we have in here? The family house, that's how everyone gets announced in Game of Thrones. You know, it's not just Daenerys, it's Daenerys of House Targaryen. So we're definitely going to need the family. And then, of course, we need to show the image. So I know that the data this card needs, the props that needs to get passed in are full name, family, image, or image URL. We'll see which one it is. I suspect it's image URL. So let's try that one. And then if it doesn't work, we'll switch it to image. Because if you note, there's both right here, but this just looks like a string that gives me the name of the image file. This is the actual link to the image itself. And I want the ID because IDs are just useful. So remember that components, every component takes as an argument an object called props. I'm going to destructure that object and just grab the keys of the things that I need. So there will be full name, family, ID, and image URL. And just to get this started, again, because I just want something really, really, really simple, I'm just going to do a div, and I'm just going to put all of these things there to make sure this is working. And what are my little red squigglies here telling me? Oh, this is just a props validation thing. So I've got a really simple character card component. Let's hook this up, and then I'll come back to this and add in Bootstrap. So now I don't think I need the unordered list anymore. You know, I'll maybe just put this stuff inside a div, because later maybe that div gets a class. And this is a list of stuff, and for the list element here, I have a key. And so maybe this needs a key. And that's where the ID will be useful, so we can add that right there. And now what I render is my character card. And to make this a little easier to read, I know the syntax starts to get weird with React stuff, and there's not really like a good way to do it. So just remember how this originally started to look. And we said family. And I'm pretty darn sure I need to import my character card. Oh, no, it is imported. So let's see what the squiggly here is complaining about. And it actually wants the key here. So let's do it like that. And I probably don't need the key anymore in my character card, so I'm going to get rid of it. And this is ugly as all heck, but it's working, and I can see it's working. So let's go ahead now. I think I do apologize. I would like to show using the Bootstrap card here. In the interests of time, I may skip it because I do want to make sure we get to everything that we need to for this morning. So I do apologize about that. So I am going to hack together like a little bit of a fugly card right here. So full name of Daenerys of House Targaryen. And now let's do image source equals image URL. So that's my really hacked together character card, but it's working. And that's good. And I don't need to use the ID yet, though. In fact, what we want to do, and this is where I do apologize because I'm not using the Bootstrap card, but I'm sort of hacking it together, is I do want a button. Let's call it like character details. Or actually, even better than a button, I want it to be a link. And this is where I get to something interesting, because what do I put here in the URL? Right, so let me put maybe a little div. I want a link I can click on. That takes me to the details page for that character. So we need two things here. First of all, we need the individual character page, and then we need to hook up some routing. So let me go ahead and build out the individual character page, and then we'll hook up the routing, and that's the first major piece to show. I am going to straight up copy a lot of this code and use it as guide code, but I'm going to do it carefully. I don't want to use the character card just to pseudocode this out. What we need to do is we need to get individual character by ID, display details. So let me go ahead and rename this to a character page. And let me go ahead and rename this to character, and this becomes character. And we're not going to be mapping anything. So in fact, I'm just going to get rid of everything inside the return statement. And we'll figure out what goes in there in a minute. And this is set character. And if I look at the Game of Thrones API, I see that to get an individual character, it's the same route, just with the ID at the end. So this suddenly, all of a sudden, feels a lot more straightforward. For now, I'm just going to make a variable named ID, and we'll set it to 1, and we'll hard code it. And in a minute, we'll see how to make this be not hard coded. And now this is a template literal instead of a string. So it's going to look like this. And right here, we put a slash and the ID. And this should still be character data. I do want to console log that. I want to rename this to get character, singular. And let's just put something just so it shows up. And I do need to hook this up to my routing. So I'm going to do that real quick in the router. And I might as well add it to the nav bar because that doesn't take that long to do either. And so now, fingers crossed, if I go to character, it shows up, which is a good start. And here in the console, I see I am getting the data for Sam. So let's go ahead and just like make a bunch of divs for this information. I think what we'll do again is character full name of, and in fact, maybe what I'll do is I'll do a bunch of object destructuring right here. Full name, family, image URL. Let's see what else we're going to want here. Title. That seems like a good one too. And so maybe we do, you know, title, full name, house, and then let's add the image tag again. And I'm sorry, this should be family instead of house. And it looks like I have some sort of error. So let's see what's happening. Let's see, house is not defined. I thought I fixed that.
Could it be because you're not using your set character? The set state?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Thank you so much. That is exactly it. There we go. Awesome. So now I've got my character. And it took us a while to get here, but we've done a really deep dive into React Router and all these things hook up. And now we come to the challenge, which is I don't want a hard-coded character. I want to have in the URL here 1, 2, 3. I want to be able to show Sam or Daenerys or whomever. So I need a param in this URL. I need to be able to feed this param into the A character page. And then I need to be able to use it in other places like the all characters page. So, you know, when we I want to be able to click on something that takes me to the page for Sam or Daenerys and so on. And the good news is because this is such a core feature, React Router has a great way to do this, and it has a useParams hook. And all we have to do is modify the path. And this colon here indicates that we're adding a param, a variable that is going to change. And then here, I'm going to import useParams from React Router DOM, and this is a hook. And this is where useEffect starts to become important. Because remember, we've talked about how like useEffect makes sure that this happens at this specific time in like the rendering chain and when a component renders and its life cycle, and we've wondered why we need this. Well, React guarantees that hooks happen in the order that you call them. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say const ID equals the useParams hook. And we'll get rid of this. And now I think that I have to do a little updating to use the useParams hook correctly. And let me actually make sure that I am using it right. And we can actually just look at the React Router docs for this. Let's actually, if we scroll down here, we can see they have all these different hooks. And let's take a look at useParams. And what I was doing wrong is useParams returns an object when we call the hook, which is just a function. And I can tell because they're destructuring it right here. And so just like when we destructure an object and this has to be the name of the key, this needs to be the name of the param that I defined in my routing. So this should look like this. And let's see if that got things working for me. So this is cautiously optimistic, but now we're cooking. So to reiterate, I can use params in my routes by in the path, I add colon and the name of the param. And if we wanted more stuff or multiple params together, we absolutely could, but we just need one for now. And I'll put the slash at the end there. And then to grab the params in a component, we use the useParams hook. And that returns an object of all the params, because maybe there's more than one in the URL. And so here we destructure that object to grab the specific param and its value that I want. And let me ask, what do you think happens if I take this line of code and I put it after the useEffect? Well, actually, I'm surprised that works, though we do get this error. I actually admit to being a little surprised that worked. I was pretty darn sure that it would fail, though I kind of wonder if there was a failed like render and then a re-render that happened very quickly. But I'm not exactly certain. But I think it makes more sense logically, and it's a bit safer to put this first, because if you think about it, before we make the API call, we need the ID, and we define this anywhere. And maybe that's why it works, in fact, because we have the get character up there. So in fact, I'll just put this right there, because this is the very first thing we're going to want to do in this component is grab the params so that we can use it everywhere else. And remember that ID gets passed right here. And then the use effect ensures that we call that function later after we've gotten the param. And then the last bit I want to show is, and I apologize that this ran a bit long, and we may not get the hands-on time. What I may do is just take a longer break now and finish up the last bit of the lecture and then end it early, so we get like maybe 45 minutes of work time in before lunch, and then I can do a quick review for folks who are interested. I want to have a button here that I can click on to see all my characters, or to see an individual character. If I go to all characters, I don't want a details placeholder. I want a link to the character themselves. So there's a couple ways to do this. We can use a link and a tagged template literal. And here we would do character / ID. And I would need to import the link. That certainly would help. But now, let's see what happened here. Probably because I added a trailing / in the route and it's not an exact match. So let's try it again. No, I actually thought this would work. Let's see what my error is saying. I'm pretty sure this is a simple typo in the route. No route matches URL characters / character /0. So that tells me that something is wrong in how this link is getting built. I think it's getting built off of the existing characters route, and that's not quite what I want. It looks like it's because all I have here in the link to is character / ID. Let's see what happens if we add this. And now let's go back and try it again. There we go. So I think what was happening was if I don't have the leading /, like this is not a relative path, so to speak. This is an absolute, if I don't have this leading / saying that the route is base route / character, what happened was, here, I'll clear this. And we'll go to all characters. I click on it, and React Router has jumped to the conclusion that the link URL includes /characters / character. Because if I go to my router, we're already on /characters. So I think the link is just adding what I put in there to the end of what was already in here. Right, we're already here. And we already have characters, and without the / up front, this got added onto that. So when you're making these links, just remember to put the leading / to indicate the full route from the base route, and then it should work for you. The last thing I want to show, and then we will take a break, is a way for this to have a bit more complexity if we want it, because this link is great, but maybe I need to have a couple things happen when I click on the view characters link. Maybe I need to display a message to the user, or maybe I need to update state. Maybe instead of a link, I need a button. And on click, candle, go to character details. That is way too long. Let's just call it like go to a character. Maybe I need stuff to happen. And I'll put a console log here just as an example. And then here I want to navigate to the character details. So let me comment this out so we don't see it there. So I can click on this button, but I need to be able to navigate. React Router gives us another really useful hook, the useNavigate hook. And I can use that to drive React Router. So in my code, I can use this useNavigate hook to navigate to different places in my routes. And we use it like so. It will return this function navigate. And then we call this navigate function and we pass it the route that we want it to go to. So I would then do this. And we would navigate to character with the slash up front. And I need the ID, right? So that's going to have to be passed in as an argument. And I can wrap this in an arrow function to say, go to the character with this ID. And fingers crossed, I got this right. Did I go? Oh, that was Sam. So this should be Aria. Okay, perfect. So I can use the useNavigate hook if I want to write code to drive my app around to different routes. So that's what I wanted to show as well. So I realized that I ended up going way longer here. I really appreciate your folks' patience and forbearance. Let's take a couple questions and then break.
I got a question. Is there
Yes,
a
sir.
benefit? Is there a benefit to using the useNavigate hook versus just creating a link, like doing link to versus using the navigate?
Yeah, that's a good question. So imagine you're making a React app and you've got create account page where the user fills out some form fields and hits create new account. Or even better, imagine actually you've got a login page where the user enters their login details and hits that. Those are good both examples of where once I hit that submit information button or login button, I want the app to go to a different page. And so I need a way in my code to tell my app to do that. And since React Router is doing all of our routing now, I need to tell React Router how to do that. Right? And that's not a link that the user clicks on because stuff needs to happen. If I'm logging in, we need to make an API request to our API to make sure those login details are good. Or if I'm creating a new account, we need to send that information to our API. And then when we get the response back and we know everything is good, then we want our program to navigate the user to the homepage, say, or their profile. So that's where useNavigate and navigate is useful for situations like that. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Adam.
Totally. Great question. Yeah, there's not an immediate use case here, but it's very useful for situations like that where we need to drive our app. Tom, yes, sir.
Just really quick so I understand. So we use the navigate here and we pass it the ID of the character, and then when it navigates to that character ID, it goes to your like a character page, and then in that character page it uses the useParams destructuring to grab the ID.
Yeah, let's see how much of this we can put on the screen to kind of see the flow, which is like my favorite thing. We've got this, and we've got let's well, I'll run with it like this. So and I'll get rid of all these other things that we don't need to see. So, like you were saying, on the all characters page, our character card gets all of this information passed in. Most critically, the character ID. And we construct this go to a character navigate function. And the link does the same thing here, by the way, if you note. Right, and in fact, I could make a variable. Maybe I'm going to name it like route to character. Like that. And then right here, I could just pass in route to character. And over here in the link, I would pass in the same thing, right? My string that represents the route to the character. And in fact, now I don't even need this ID because we grab it and we create this right off the bat. It doesn't hurt, and it doesn't hurt that this is in the arrow function, but whatever. It's sort of both ways work perfectly fine. And let me do a sanity check to make sure that that works. Yep. So I have the route to my character, and I get the ID because I pass it in as a prop to this component. And I've got this function, and when I call navigate, it goes there. Or if we had the link, we would click on it and React Router would go there. And so whether it's with the useNavigate hook or the React Router link component, those hook into React Router. And the next thing that happens, as you pointed out, is React Router looks at its routing and it says, hey, I've got a route, character / something. I should render a character page. Let me change the URL to be the right path, set the right value for ID, and then render this component. And then the a character component, we have a little bit of state here, but most importantly, we use the React Router useParams hook to grab the ID, this value 0, from the URL. And then our a character page says, cool, I'll create this function to make my API call. Oh, there's a use effect. I need to fire this use effect. I need to call my async API call function to get the data. I get the data. I update my component state. So now I have to re-render, and now I render this and I render the information. Does that help answer your question, Tom, and kind of walk through the flow of what's going on there?
Yeah, that really helped me see the flow. Thank you.
Totally. Great question. Yeah, I highly recommend starting to use like split screens. I'll often have 3 or 4. Diagrams can be useful as well, but some way to make it visual. And DJ, yes, sir, I saw you had a question as well.
I noticed that when you specify the route, you specified it with a colon, but it was still able to find it even though you didn't put that in your link path. Is that a nuance of React Router? If you look inside your router definition for your path, right there, you have the colon ID, but it was still able to find the page without the colon in there. And it
Yeah.
shows in the URL.
So the colon is how we tell React Router that this has going to be replaced with some value. It's essentially a variable. So like character/1, character/2.
So it doesn't need the colon itself inside the actual link to be able to find it.
The colon is not part of the URL. Like if we look here, this is the ID 0 right here. So what React Router DOM does is it looks at this URL character/0 and it says, oh, this part after /character, I need to grab that value and stick it in a variable named ID.
Okay, I got it. Thanks.
Yeah, great question. And again, we could have like multiple things here. Like if I did this and I needed to, for some reason, let's go to the head character page. You can have multiple params. And this is a really common convention. You'll see this with Django and other places. And just in general, when you see like URLs and routes and paths, the colon indicates a param. It's like a placeholder for a value. And this is the thing after the colon is the name of the param. So like here, if I had two things in here, like, actually, we can show this right now. I'll just console log. So let me go to the nearest page and let me make this a bit wider. And then I think we should take a break because we've been going for a while. And I think we want to see the router. So in my router, I've just updated this path. I've added 2 params to this path just for fun. The first param is ID. The second one is something. And so up here in the URL, I've got character/0, which React Router figures out is the first param for ID. And then the second param, foo, and it figures out that's the value for something. And so when we call this useParams hook, it returns an object. And each of those params is a key, is a property on that object. And so like if I refresh this page, ID is 0, something is foo, from these things getting printed out. You know, and if I change this from foo to bar, and by the way, I think the foo and bar, I think come from foobar, which somehow made its way into the CS world. I think from like the post World War II generation of academics. I see ID is 0, something is bar, right? Or here, ID is 3, which is Aria's ID, and something is bar. So that's how you can construct like more complex URLs and routes and paths with different params.
That part I understood. It was the part about it not having to actually have the colon in the URL link itself. That was the part that I see now.
Got it.
Because I'm used to the question mark, ampersands, and the extra stuff after your literal files or directories or whatever you're calling it.
You can do that as well. Like if you do that for a query param, and then it's something like my thing equals hello.
Yeah, that passes the key value pairs. That part I'm used to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we get it the same way. Let me double check that. No, I don't remember off the top of my head how to grab this, but there is a way to grab this with React Router as well. And let me go ahead and get rid of this stuff because we don't want to use that. Okay, awesome. Let's take a break because we have been going for a while. It's almost 11. So how do folks sound about a 15-minute break? And then we can come back and there's one more thing I want to show you. And then we can have, I know it's not the full hour, but we can have 30 minutes to at least to get the ball rolling on writing some code and hooking up like some routes with params. How does that sound to people? Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, folks, and see you all in 15 minutes. All right. So we had a bit of a break, and there was a really good question kind of around like, what's the importance of useParams, especially if we can pass stuff around as props? And there is a lot of different stuff happening here. So let's just kind of review what's happening with our app, right? We have the app component. And if we go there real quick, and we skip all the pseudocode, we remember, you know, we've got, and now I'm really getting up to speed with TLDraw. We've got the navbar component, and that one's pretty straightforward, right? And there's not really any React router stuff happening there. We've got this special outlet component. And this is where React Router renders stuff in here based on the path. Right, so this is where all of our pages get rendered. And then we've got a footer. And I want the footer to be black. And so we have all sorts of stuff happening inside the outlet. Like at one moment, it's rendering all characters. Another moment, when we navigate somewhere else, it's rendering an individual character. Right, but unlike what we're used to, we can't pass props into the outlet. There's no way, because we're gonna learn in a moment something that we can do, but it's pretty different from props. You know, like we're used to maybe like we do something like this, and then we put like characters array in and we pass that as a prop. You know, like do stuff to get character data. Or maybe if it was if instead of outlet, this was our individual character page, you know, we could pass in the individual character like so. But we don't know what component is getting rendered here in the outlet, because it will just depend on our path and where we navigate to, and React Router puts that in. So we don't have a way of like directly injecting stuff into, let's make this blue, whatever this, you know, various page components that are children are on child paths of, right? There's that children array, and we have all those things in there. We don't have a way of directly passing in a prop. But what we do have, and let's make this green, is the URL, HTTP localhost 5173 character. And what React Router does, and let's make this, I don't know, some sort of bluish color. Is it will look, React Router changes the URL, useParams grabs info from the URL. So we can use the URL and the useParams hook to pass information around. And that's how we pass in the character ID to the individual character page. Because here on all characters, I see everyone. I click John's page. Let's see, this probably did not work because I was just changing something. There's no way to pass ID in as a prop. I need the character's ID to make my API call to get their information, but React Router has put it up here in the URL, so I need to grab that. And that's what I can do with the useParams hook. So I hope that was some helpful review, and I want to check in to see if folks have any questions before we move on to looking at context. Cool. So if we go like way back to the README for today, there were a couple things we were going to talk about. We really dug into useParams and useNavigate. Now we need to look at useOutletContext. So context is a general React feature that's a bit more advanced. It solves the problem of how you get data down through several layers of components. Because if I have like 4 or 5 nested layers of components, you know, one problem might be I have to pass data down through like 5 as props through like 5 levels of components. And this can just be really frustrating. And this is called prop drilling. And you all may or may not have encountered this. I don't know if we have enough layers yet in our app. But the other problem is I don't always know which components are inside what other components. So I can't pass data as props. And that's the problem that we encounter with React Router and with this individual characters page and the outlet. Because if we go to app.jsx, there will be different components that get rendered inside the outlet here at different times. You know, right now it's the homepage component. Right now it's the about page component. Right now it's the all characters component. And right now it's the, did I break something again? Oh, that link doesn't work at all. And in fact, I need to remove it from the nav bar because a link to character slash does nothing because this path is always for a specific character. So whose character would I put there, right? I don't want to hard code it to anyone, so it doesn't make sense to have in our nav. When I click on an individual character here, it's now the A character page component that gets rendered here. And I can't just like, you know, make a prop that then gets passed into whatever it is. React doesn't quite work that way. But there is something that React has called context that lets us do something similar in a different way. And it does a lot of this work under the hood for us. And so we saw that we can use useParams for like very small bits of data that can fit in the URL bar that makes sense. But if we had a whole JSON object, or say like a function with some logic that we need to pass around, then we can't do that in the URL bar. And then we start running into limitations. So let's look at context, React context, specifically with React Router and the outlet. And let's see a real use case for it. Because what would be awesome is if we could have a list of favorites. Right? And so let me go to app.jsx, and we've hooked up, we've done all these features, and the next one we're going to pseudocode is the favorites feature, or the favorites functionality. So I want to be able to on character card for a character, click a favorite button to add the character to my list of favorites. I want a favorites page where I can see the list of favorites. And I think a good stretch goal would be on all characters page. I can see which characters are favorited. And another stretch goal would be unfavorite a character, right? And that's actually probably the more important one of the two stretch goals. So let's quickly talk through what we need to do to build this. I know that I'm going to need to create a favorites page. I know I'm going to need to hook it up to a route. The real question is, where am I going to put the data? And does anyone have any thoughts? Like, I know I'm going to want like an array of objects that holds like character information for my favorite characters. Where in my application is that array of data going to live? We're definitely going to need to use useState, Adrian. Absolutely. Yes, it's going to be React component state. And the question is where? Landon. Yes, sir.
Could you put it in local storage or in a global variable?
We could put it in local storage, in the browser's local storage. We would not want to create like a JavaScript global variable that causes all sorts of potential problems and is very difficult to manage and control. Local storage introduces a lot of complexities and is a bit outside scope and would be more of like, once we have this working, maybe we want to back it up. But since we're using a React app, our first tool should be like doing what we can in React. Adrian, you're absolutely right that we're going to need this data on the favorites page. So let's actually think about functionality. A favorites page where I can see a list of characters. We need favorites array, right? We need to be able to give it the favorites array of data. On the character card for a character, I need to be able to click the favorite button to add the character to my list of favorites. So what am I going to have to add to the character card in terms of like data or functionality and behavior? What am I going to have to give the character card? Yeah, some sort of on-click function. Need to give it add to favorites function. That will add the character to the list of favorites. Where is the character card getting rendered in my app? Over here, right? In the all characters page. So I may or may not need to pass data into all characters. If I can get the data into all characters, I can pass it into each character card as a prop. So I'll put as a question mark. And we'll come back to that. If I'm going to unfavorite a character, I might need that there as well, but I think that'll be a stretch goal. Over here, if I want to see who's favorited and who's not, then I definitely need to be able to pass in the list of who's a favorite, right? So I need list of favorites. Well, either here, or in each character card. So I've got at least two different places where I need both data and functionality. The favorites page is going to need the list of favorites, and then either the character card component or the all characters page component will need like my add to favorites functionality. So without worrying about React Router and just working with components and props and state the way we've been earlier up till now, if you have like multiple child components that need some of the same stuff, where do you put that component, state, and logic? I see a couple comments in the chat in the parent and app.jsx. Exactly, right? If I could, like let's say here we have favorites, set favorites, and we might write a function that's add to favorites character, and this should be an arrow function. And what this will do is I will create an updated array of favorites. I'm assuming each character is an object here, like we're getting back from our API. And then I'll use set favorites with the updated state. And if we weren't dealing with the outlet, like if we wanted to put this stuff in the nav bar and the footer, I would do like favorites equals favorites. And maybe the footer is the one where we want to be able to pass add to favorites as the function as a prop. And maybe I would do it something like that. Right? So the rule in designing React apps is when you have logic and functionality or state that needs to be shared amongst components, you need to lift that state up to the parent and lift that functionality up to the parent, and then you pass it down as props. However, we can't do that here because this outlet component is a placeholder for a bunch of different components. So we can't pass this down as a prop. And that is where React context and React Router DOM's outlet context comes in. And context, it's sort of like, it's almost, you can think of it as like an escape hatch for state. It's like you have a box off to the side and, like you put stuff in the box and you can grab stuff back from the box. It's like a separate container. And I can do this. So this is a prop, but context is a bit special. And it takes an object. So I'll write, I'm just going to put the object right inside here. I could write it as a variable, but it's good to start getting used to this syntax. And the object is going to have two properties. One will be the list of favorites, and the other will be add to favorites. And once we get that working, we'll implement remove from favorites, and we'll pass that as well. So again, I have an object here with these two properties, and I'm passing that object to this context prop. And this context prop is special. So context is a bit of a special word. And to go back to my TL draw, if I zoom out a bit, let's use a circle and let's make it like blue. Context is stored sort of separately on its own. And then whenever we want to use context anywhere, we can use, of course, use outlet context hook. So like, for instance, I cannot, in all characters, grab an object, grab a prop named context. And so it functions a little differently from a normal prop in that sense. So let's go ahead and let's use this. And I think just right here in the character card, let's go ahead and use the use context hook, and then the use outlet context hook, excuse me, and we can grab the function that we need and put it in right here. Now, if I wanted to, I could do this here. For simplicity's sake, I think I'll put it here to start. So I'm going to go ahead and import useOutletContext from React Router DOM. And we want the add to favorites function that we set as a prop on that context object. And now I have grabbed that function from my context that I stuck it in. So right, there's the outlet has this special context, and we can call this with any component that the outlet is rendering for us. And so then over here, let's make a button. And its on click will be add to favorites. And now here I may have goofed a little bit because I didn't pass in the full information. So we are just going to have to, for simplicity's sake, we'll just pass in these things as what gets passed in here. And I think what I'll do is I'll make a handler function because it will get a little too complex. Handle, add to favorites. And all this does is I will call add to favorites, and we'll pass it an object, and in there we'll put ID, full name. I try to keep stuff alphabetical. We'll create an object and pass it in as the argument to the add to favorites function that we call. And I'm putting it there just for readability. And now here I can make a button, and its on click will be handle add to favorites. And we'll call this just add to favorites. And let's see if this works or if I made any errors along the way. And let me go ahead and refresh my all characters page. So no errors, which is a good sign. Let's go to app.jsx and let's add console log favorites, because that will be a nice indicator of if this works or not. And lo and behold, we got something in there. Now, let's add Sansa, and let's make sure I have two separate people, and I see Samuel and Sansa. So this is outlet context, and you can do this with other things in React as well. Context is a React thing. It's more of a special case. You want to use components and props as your go-tos. And then if you're running into a problem, you use context, or if you have a lot of layers. But like components and props are your bread and butter. So the next step here is to build the favorites page and see this stuff. But before doing that, I want to check in and see what questions folks have. How are folks feeling with this basic idea of context? It's this sort of escape hatch where I can put stuff and then grab it using the useOutletContext hook. Pretty good, so need to spend some time writing code with it to get comfortable. How are we feeling? Okay, awesome. Let's do a little group coding now then. And because I think that's the best use of our time, because I know I ate into the workshop time today. Let's group code to use this favorites context on our favorites page. So let me go ahead and just do the setup to get that going. We know we're going to want a favorites page. And let me go ahead and create it. And export it. And add it to our router. And add it to our navbar. And so now I've got a favorites page, but there's nothing there. And this is where I could use a little help with the group coding. And Landon, you were asking to see card JSX again. Yeah, we can totally take a look at that. And let's look at that maybe down here.
Thank you.
And I can throw a list of folks out, or actually, let me, especially since this is something new, let me get a volunteer. So we want to use outlet context to get the favorites array into the favorite page. How did I get? Oh yeah, go ahead.
Don't you have to import it? The what is it called? Use outlet context.
Yep, exactly. We're going to use the outlet context hook. So let's go ahead and import that. Right, because remember, this favorites page, it's getting, you can think of it as it's getting rendered inside the outlet. The outlet is a placeholder, and this is inside it. So in fact, if we go to TL draw, you know, here is right now favorites page. And so maybe it even makes sense to think of the outlet context as looking, you know, more like this. It's the context of the outlet. And Nika, you want to take us to the next step here now that we've imported use outlet context? What do I want to do with that use outlet context hook?
Don't you want to put it in your function for favorites page? I don't remember the syntax off the top of my head. Const?
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
It's add to favorites, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
add to favorites.
And we'll just let me just make a variable. We'll call it my outlet context object. Just something really long to indicate that we're getting an object here. And let's go ahead and console log that and see what that looks like. And let me put a message here so we can see this. So outlet context object. So use outlet context, the hook is a function that we call, and it returns an object. And look what's in here, a property add to favorites, that's a function, and a property favorites, that's an array. And actually, Nika, I have one more question. If we wanted to add something else to the context, like let's say I want to add just another property here named like something else, and just have it say like hello, like I want a property named message that says hello. How would I add it to the context object so that we see it printed out in this console log statement?
Like using dot notation, you're saying?
Not quite.
Or you'd
And
have
this,
to, I guess you'd have to add it. You'd have to add it in there so it would show up in
yeah,
the object.
yeah. And let me, in fact, write it like this, because I think maybe this will help us think about this. And we'll do favorites and add to favorites. And then, like you were saying, message. Hello. And let's just pass this object in. So I realize seeing the nesting like this may be confusing to folks. So we call this useOutletContext hook. It returns an object. The object it returns is whatever we pass into this special context prop on the outlet component. Right? The outlet has, I wish I knew how to like background this. There we go. You know, think like context as in the surrounding environment. We can give an object for our outlet that becomes the surrounding environment for whatever component React Router renders inside that outlet. And the way we can grab that context or surrounding environment is with this useOutletContext hook. And it gives us an object. And so favorites is one of the properties on that object. And then in fact here, let's import the character card. And let's do favorites.map. See, I'm in fact going to just copy this from all characters. If I go over here, I'm just going to copy this whole bit right here. And we're going to put this on the favorites page. Except instead of characters, this will be favorites. And fingers crossed, let's see what my error is. Maybe there's no one in favorites. Let's add someone. Hey, all right, we have Daenerys. I could add Daenerys again because I haven't added any logic. Let's add Jon Snow and Arya. And now they're rendering on favorites. Now I am getting this warning of 2 children with the same key because I have 2 Daeneryses. So we can ignore that. But now we're seeing stuff get rendered, but we're not passing data as props. We're sharing data through the context and using the useOutletContext hook to grab it. This is really the last thing to cover. I know we have a couple minutes left. I think what might be useful is maybe if we group code, if someone wants to volunteer, and maybe we think through like, how could I write a function to remove someone from the favorites list? How could I change this button to be add to favorites or remove from favorites based on if this person is a favorite or not? Nate or Nika, could we filter it? Yes, I think we absolutely can filter it. So let's write a function here up in our app, remove from favorites. And for this, it could take just the ID. I'm just going to pass in the ID for simplicity. And I want to return favorites filtered, and we'll have it for C for character. And if I always get a little confused here, so we'll do if C.id is character ID, return false. Person we want to remove. Otherwise, return true. And I think that should do it. So now I want to pass this remove from favorites function into my character card. How can I do that? How did we pass add to favorites into the character card? David, yes, sir.
Yeah, so you want to add it to the object that you're now passing into your context prop in the outlet.
Yeah, exactly. This context object is where we put whatever we want to be able to grab through the context. And then David, walk me through grabbing that remove from favorites function here in the character card, and maybe the logic of maybe which button we want to show. But how do I then grab the remove from favorites function just to use it to begin with?
Yeah, so in your const add to favorites, use outlet context, you're gonna add remove to favorites or whatever you called it.
Yeah, exactly. I think remove from favorites was what I called it. I hope it was. Sorry.
And then just to mirror what you have there, you're gonna write a handler function to call that.
Yeah.
Actually, you probably, yeah.
Let's do.
But yeah, put it in a button on click, handle remove favorites.
Yeah, and in fact, this one's even a bit simpler because it just takes the ID. So I'm just going to do it like this, remove from favorites ID. And now if I go to all characters, let's see if this works. Do I have any favorites right now? I do not. Let's add Daenerys. Let's add Sam. I see Daenerys and Sam in my favorites. Let's remove Daenerys. Uh-oh. And let's remove Sam. So I did something wrong. Let's look in the app here where I wrote my remove from favorites function. And I made the easiest of all mistakes. Does anyone want to tell me what mistake I made here in my remove from favorites function? What is missing?
You haven't changed the state variable?
Yeah, I need to set favorites to the new state. I got so wrapped up on my implementation. If I had pseudocoded, I would have remembered. I wish I could say that I did that on purpose, but that is a great pseudocoding teaching moment. And hey, Daenerys is gone. Sam is gone. Now we're cooking. And David, did you have a question?
No, sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
No worries. So I think the last thing I want is, let's go to all characters and let's add John. So John is now a favorite. I don't want to see both these buttons. I only want to see the correct one. If they're not a favorite, I want to see add to favorites. If they are a favorite, I want to see remove from favorites. How can I implement that here on the character card? Any thoughts? And in fact, let's pseudocode this one out. Only show appropriate add remove favorites button. Brian, yes, sir.
There's numerous ways you could do it, but I think just for the sake of quickness, you could write a function right next to your add and delete functions at the app level called isFavorite. You know, it takes in a character ID, and then you can pass that in your context throughout, and so your character card can get that isFavorite and run that with its own character ID, and then get the answer true or false, and then basically display the button based on the outcome of that isFavorite call to the app.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation. I have to figure out if I'm currently a favorite. I have to do that by grabbing the favorites array from useOutletContext and seeing if I'm in it. And in fact, maybe a favorites object would have worked better, but we're too late to refactor it. And then hide show the button, you know, based on isFavorite Boolean. So I already have this in my context, so let's just go ahead and grab favorites from there. And I think what I want to do is write this little function isFavorite. Oh, Brian, yes, sir.
Since you may need to share this behavior across other types of components in the future, it might be good to implement that function at the app level and pass that function down through context to anyone who needs it. And the only thing character card has to do is call that with its own ID, if that makes sense.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I like that. That is a good idea. Yeah, let's do that. So let's go to app.jsx. Let's write a function isFavorite. And this also puts all of our logic kind of for dealing with this stuff in one spot, which I like as well. Check isFavorite. And it will take an ID. And oh man, I think we want to do favorites filter and character, and if the character ID equals the favorites ID, the ID that we're looking for, so return that. And then what I want to do is I want to get the length. And I want to see if the length is greater than 0. So this is very, very, very succinct JavaScript, I realize. I'm filtering through the favorites array. Hopefully I got this right. I'm only returning favorites that have the ID that I want. That gives me an array. I'm looking at the length of that array. That length of that array should be 0 or 1, or whatever. If it's more than 0, I know it's a favorite and it is there, and this will return true. If it's 0, then that will return false. So this will return a Boolean. And you're saying, let's pass this in as context. So let's see if this works. And let's go to the character card. And instead of favorites, we'll do check isFavorite. And let me make sure I got the name right. Yep. And I'm going to do a quick console log check to make sure that to see if this is working or not. So let's do maybe like full name is favorite, and we'll do check isFavorite ID. And let me return and refresh this on my favorite. And let's add someone. So everyone is not a favorite right now, which is exactly right. And it would help if instead of full name, this was $, full name. And there's a lot of falses. Daenerys is a favorite, true. So that kind of gives me confidence that this is working. And I think I'll put that there. And so now we need to just hide or show the button based on if someone's a favorite. So what I'll do is let's do const is favorite equals Becca's favorite ID. And we know that's working, so I'll leave that there, but comment it out. And we can make this, I'll make just a simple render button function. And it will be a ternary that looks at is favorite. And this actually, I'm not going to do a ternary. I'm going to make it a little easier to read. If they are a favorite, we return the remove from favorites. If they aren't a favorite, we return add to favorites. And now we render the button and fix whatever error I made here along the way. And I'm missing my closing curly bracket.
You're not returning the button in the else statement on line 49.
Oh, thank you so much. And now we see we've just got add to favorites, remove from favorites, add to favorites, remove from favorites, and we're cooking. So that went, I know we ran a bit long, but it was great to add this stretch feature. And hopefully that helped illustrate more the behavior of outlet context. So thank you all. I know we didn't get the work time, but I got some feedback that the driving was really useful. And I hope that was the case for everyone. And so your assignments for today are first with Rick and Morty, add a character details page and use the useParams so that there's the character ID in there for the character, just like we did in the first part of the lecture with the Game of Thrones API. So definitely start here, adding this to your Rick and Morty. And then once you have that working, we're going to make a favorite characters page that will work pretty much the same way as well. You do need to be using the Bootstrap card. I did not get that in, but I think that should be relatively straightforward. And the only thing we need to change here is the contents of this character card and put the Bootstrap card in there. So that's sort of the plan for today. And I think this is really well scoped. It's a pairing day, so we'll get the pairs out. If folks want to take like a little bit of time, like 20, not more than 30 minutes, please, to review stuff after lunch. I know that was a request and something we talked about doing. That's totally fine. But please do pair and work together on this today. I think it's a good day for it. So you might just have to pick one person's Rick and Morty to add the stuff to. All right. Thank you very much, folks. We ran a bit long, so let me wrap up here so we can break for lunch, and I'll take a couple questions.